today's quick check, we're talking about fractions, decimals, and percents. We want to rename 9/20 as a percent, or 9 divided by 20. The easiest thing for me is to use Desmos. So I'm going to go to my Desmos calculator and I am going to type in 9 divided by 20. And that's 0.45. That's what it equals as a decimal. I'm going to go ahead and write this down. So here's my fraction, 9 over 20. That equals 0.45 as a decimal. And then if you want to change it to a percent, you have to move your decimal 2 times to the right to change it to a percent. So I am going to move this decimal 2 times to the right, and that would become 45%. So this is the percent, and I'm going to make a little note down here that says move decimal, 2 times to the right. If it's already a percent and you want to change it back to a decimal, you would move it 2 times to the left. So if you're going from decimal to a percent, you move it 2 times to the right. If you're going backwards, a percent to a decimal, you would move it 2 times to the left. So this would be our answer as a percent. Rename 0.345 as a percent. So again, we have our decimal and we're going to a percent, which means we need to move our decimal 2 times to the right. So this will become 34.5%. My new decimal is right here. I'm going to go back here. Notice I didn't put the decimal at the end. You don't have to have a decimal if it's at the end. You can put it there, but it does not have to be there. It's understood to be at the end if you don't see the decimal. All right, so this is my answer. It's 34.5%. Rename 32% as a decimal and a fraction in simplest form. Okay, so we have a percent. It's 32%. Then we also need to write it as a decimal. And then we also need to write it as a fraction in simplest form. So here we go. To go from a percent to a decimal, we're going to have to move our decimal 2 places to the left. So I would start back here. Since I don't see a decimal, it's hidden in the back. And I would move it 2 times, and that would be 0.32. So that's what it is as a decimal. And again, you can put 0 in front if you want, but you don't have to. It's understood to be there. And then if I want to write it as a fraction, I have 0.32. So I'm going to use 32, and I'm going to put it over okay, well, you either put it over 10, 100, 1,000, so on and so forth, and it's however many places you have. So in this case, we have 2 decimal places, which means I want 2 zeros. I want it over 100. If you were trying to convert 0.4 to a fraction, you would take 4 over 10. You would just have 1 0 because you just have 1 decimal place. If you had 0.375, you would put your 375 over 3 zeros. So 1,000 because you have 3 decimal places. So that's kind of how you make it into a fraction, but this fraction is not in simplest form. You have to divide the top and bottom by the same number to reduce it, but for some of us, figuring out that number is really hard. So you can just go to Desmos and you can type in 32 divided by 100 and gives your answer as a decimal, which we know it's 0.32, but we want it as a reduced fraction. So we're going to go over here and hit that fraction button, and that reduces it for you. So the most reduced fraction is 8 over 25. So this is your simplified fraction, and this is your decimal. Now we want to put these in order from least to greatest. Least means the smallest. Greatest means the biggest. For me, when I compare numbers, I like to compare them as decimals because decimals remind me of money, and I usually have a pretty good sense of money. So this first one is already a decimal. I'm just going to leave this one alone. This first one is 0.367. I'm going to convert this percent to a decimal. And to go from a percent to a decimal, we're going to move it 2 times to the left. So this would be 0.365 as a decimal. And then 9/25, if I want to convert this to a decimal, I would go to my calculator and I would type in 9 divided by 25, and that's 0.36 as a decimal. So these are my 3 things that I'm comparing. And now I'm going to put them in order from smallest to biggest. So 0.367, 0.365, and 0.36. Now since these have 3 decimal places, I could give this a 3rd decimal place by putting a 0 on the end. You don't have to do that, but for some of you it might make it seem easier. So we're really comparing 0.36, 0.35, and 0.65 and 0.67. The smallest would be this one, 0.36. The next would be 0.365, and then the biggest would be 0.367. Now you're probably not going to see a multiple choice answer written like that. They're probably going to have them written back in their original form. So this is probably what your answer would look like from least to greatest. But for me, I like to convert them all to decimals so that I can compare them all, and then you can convert them back to their original form. All right, on a city block, 3/5 of the people subscribe to the newspaper. What percent subscribe to the newspaper? So we want to know the percent. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this fraction and I'm going to turn it into a decimal. So I'm going to do that by going to my calculator and doing 3 divided by 5. That's 0.6 as a decimal. And now I'm going to change it to a percent. And to change it to a percent, we move our decimal place 2 times to the right. And since there's no number here, we're going to put in a 0 as a placeholder, as a place value. So this is really 60. And you can put the decimal at the end if you want to, but you won't normally see it. So it's really just 60%. So 3/5 is the same as 60%. And I think that's it. Yep, good luck on this quick check.